Hello, my name is Kennedy Bailey, and I'm here with NMBU's Writing Centre to talk to you today about academic presentation skills. Why do we need to think about academic presentation skills? Because information needs to be well delivered in order to be well understood. If we want our audience to understand something, we need to make sure we're delivering it in a way that it is easily understood. Today's objectives are twofold. First, we're going to go through some practical tips to make sure that you're meaningfully improving your public speaking and presentation skills. And we're going to talk about what we can do to boost your confidence, to make sure you feel more comfortable, more yourself in front of an audience or group of people. First, let's look into preparing for your presentation, because those crucial steps of initial preparation are what is going to set the tone for the rest of your presentation cycle and process. The basics we'll look at here is first audience, understanding how to tailor content and tone for the people in the room. Purpose, meaning clearly defining our point and main message. Structure, so how we want our ideas to connect and where things go. And flow, meaning transitions, meaning those connection points. All right, audience. When we think about our audience, we are thinking about who is in the room. Consider how familiar are they with your topic. People that know a lot about your topic, meaning experts in your field, are going to need less explanation than a generalized audience, right? Take that into account and make sure that you're explaining what needs to be explained for the people that are in the room. Then think about tone, meaning how formal should you be? You can and should be a lot more informal with a group of your peers than you might be in front of an evaluative board. Meaning I can talk to a group of university students in a way that's much more casual than the way that I would talk to a group of professors or evaluators who determine whether or not I receive a degree. Then I'm going to have a bit more formality in my sentence structure and in my body language. Next, you want to think about purpose. Sometimes this is given to you. This might be the assignment, right? But make sure that you know what the purpose of this presentation is and that you're fulfilling that purpose. So my example here is a classroom presentation explaining the focus, scope, and research you do for your master's thesis. Make sure, as you're planning your presentation, you are fully answering that purpose. Next, we want to talk about structure. This is the most important part of your planning. What you should do first is introduce yourself, your topic, and your focus. We're lifting the curtains here, but this is exactly what I did in the start of the video. I stepped up here, I said, hello, my name is, I'm here on behalf of, I'm here to present, I am presenting to you in order to. Introducing myself is a great way to start the presentation and make sure that everyone knows from the beginning who I am, what I'm talking about, and why I'm here. So start there. Second, you want to present the main content in an organized way and break your ideas into sections and present those sections in small chunks. You may want to add context first, so start with background, general knowledge stuff, and then move through things chronologically. So this idea was chosen because I broke my research question into 3, 5, 7, 12, whatever key ideas, here they are, to explore idea 1. First, I did this. That's a good way to bring your audience into your presentation topic. Finally, you want to conclude the presentation by summarizing and restating. I like to say that you should imagine that someone will walk in at the end of your presentation. In your conclusion, you want to make sure that you say as much as you can to catch that person up, right? What does someone need to know this presentation was about? That's your conclusion. Once you've worked through structure, you begin to think about flow. How will your ideas connect? Where are you transitioning? This can be verbal, so transition words like first, second, next, finally, relatedly, however, in contrast. Verbal cues are a great way to signal flow. You can also think about visual aids that can help you signal flow. So you're seeing, again, I'm lifting that curtain, you're seeing what I'm doing here. In my visual aid, in my slideshow here, I have subheadings, I have title pages that say, right now I'm talking to you about this. And then in each additional slide, I'm numbering things. The reason that I'm doing this is to establish flow, to make sure that my ideas are connecting in a way that is logical for me as the presenter and for you, my audience. All right, let's talk a bit more about those visual aids. Visual aids are something that, if you choose to use them, can make or break your presentation. They can either be super distracting or they can be really helpful. What you're looking for in a strong visual aid is simplicity first. So you want to make sure that the things being presented are simple and that you as the speaker are doing the work of elaborating on them. Your visual aid is not your presentation. You also want to make sure that they are clear, so things are easy to read, easy to understand, and aren't distracting. And it's a good idea to make sure they're consistent. This means keeping color schemes and additional materials more or less consistent so that things look cohesive. One good visual aid you can use, and is often used, are images. Effective use of images, one, can draw attention to a point. Maybe you're taking photographs on your research. But it can also give you as the audience a break. So maybe you've been trying to listen and read. If I present to you an image like this one, now you are spending more time looking at this image, processing the image, and listening to what I'm saying. There's nothing here to distract you from what I'm doing. Images can be a great visual aid, especially if they're relevant to what you're doing. You can also look for selecting appropriate visuals like charts and graphs and diagrams. The diagram you're seeing here shows absolutely nothing. It is a metaphor for your own graphs and charts that shows something. You can build graphs and charts tons of ways online. Just make sure that they're simple and that they're easy to read. Something I like about this graph, even though it shows no data actually, is that it's only using 2 colors here and there's not a lot happening on it. This is going to prevent my audience from getting distracted. The next type of visual aid is the type of visual aid you want to avoid. Please try to limit the text that you put on a given slide. This is a bad slide, and the reason that it is a bad slide is because, one, it's distracting. So if you, as my audience right now, are trying to read this slide, it's very likely that you're not listening to me speak. As people, we don't process well audio content and text content simultaneously. It's too much. You can't focus. You end up not really getting the information from either source. I really hope you're not reading the slides right now and that you're listening. But you want to avoid this because it does distract the audience. And as the presenter, the slide is distracting for me because there's so much on the slide, it makes me want to read it. Readers are not presenters. I'm speaking to you, not reading to you. That's why you want to limit text on a given slide. If you have to, for some reason, put a lot of text on a slide, read that slide. Don't let the information you're speaking contrast too heavily against the information you're presenting. Otherwise, it becomes an understanding issue for your audience. But avoid needing to read. Really, this is like has to happen only. I'm presenting information that you must get. And the best way to do that is to read it to you. Put it on the slide. That's okay, but don't gravitate towards that as an option. All right, our next absolutely do not do is please avoid inaccessible colors and fonts. This pains me to show because this is a terribly, terribly ugly slide, right? But the 2 things that are making it ugly is, one, colors. So neons, we tend to shy away from because they're hard to read. And another thing you want to keep in mind with colors is it's very important that there is contrast between your background and your font. So if I'm writing on a black background, I'm going to use a white font. If I'm writing on a white background, I'm going to use dark blue, black, dark green. I'm creating that contrast so that you can read the words. With fonts, there are many, many ways to go wrong. Keep it simple. Do not use fonts that are distracting. Some people will not listen to your presentation because the slides are in Comic Sans, so don't create that problem for yourself. Make sure they're not too small. Can you even see 0.2 on this one? It is very little, or they're too big. If it's too big, you might be aiming for readability, but what might be happening for you instead is that it's getting cut off. So avoid keeping things too big. All right, that was visual aids. Next, we're going to talk about delivery techniques. Some tips I have for you for confident and engaging delivery. Some of you right now are thinking like, oh, I'm just not a good public speaker. I get so nervous. That's okay. I'm here to tell you that everyone gets nervous before public speaking. I public speak all the time. It's part of my job, right? And every time before I get in front of a group of people or before I get in front of a camera, I have that like feeling of like, oh no, super normal. What you want to do is focus on strategies to reduce nervousness and cause your delivery to be more effective. Some things that you should try are mindful breathing exercises. I have this lovely little graphic that I'll show you here. Breathe in and breathing out. It feels silly sometimes, but the reason we do that is because taking time, 2 minutes, 5 minutes if you're patient, to really slow down your breathing regulates your nervous system and slow down your heart rate. This is good for public speaking because it helps us get out of that nervous, scared state of mind that can cause us to make silly mistakes or speak too fast, which is what happens to me when I feel nervous. Something else you can try is positive visualization, meaning before you get up to the front of that room, before you get in front of that camera, you should say to yourself, I prepared very hard for this and it's going to go well. I am going to do a good job. This is really helpful to kind of put yourself already into that place of success and self-satisfaction. So try it out, get up there and act like you already did this presentation and it already went great. Come in with that good mindset of like, I'm ready for this and I'm prepared. The last thing that I would remind you of is that you are your biggest coach and often you are your toughest critic. Something we see often is that people kind of get into their head and are like, oh, I'm going to make a mistake and everyone's going to know. Two things. One, there's a good chance that your audience, or at least members of your audience, are distracted or are not paying as close attention as you might think that they are. They might not notice your mistakes. They don't know your presentation like you know your presentation. Many, many times you're going to be like, oh, I stumbled there, or I messed up there, or I skipped a slide there. No one noticed. You're okay. The second thing I would remind you of is that every person in your audience is a human being with their own independent life. Maybe they're presenting after you and the whole time you're presenting they're like, oh my God, I hope I don't, I hope I don't, I hope I remember. Or maybe they're the professor and they are paying close attention, but you should know they're not sitting up at night thinking, oh, so-and-so stumbled. How embarrassing. They're thinking about their groceries. They're thinking about the laundry. They're thinking about the TV show they'd like to watch. Don't take yourself too seriously. Give yourself a good margin of grace and understand that the person in the room that this presentation is most important to is absolutely you. That in mind, we're going to talk about body language. With your face, try to make eye contact with your audience members or close enough. A tip that my dad shared with me when I was learning public speaking as a child is if you're just too nervous and you don't want to look people in the eyes, find a point on the wall that looks roughly eye level to most people and make eye contact with the wall. This is just going to look like you are looking at the person next to everybody else. So if I'm looking at you and you're looking slightly this way at the wall, I'm assuming you're making eye contact with someone else. It looks pretty natural. Don't stare hard at one point at the wall the whole time. That looks really unnatural. But try to look at people. If it's too hard, look at points near people. Keep it at eye level. The second thing you should be doing with your face is smiling. One, this looks better. I look more engaged. I look excited to be here. If I gave this entire presentation like this, it's going to affect how you view not only me as a speaker, but my content. So it looks like I'm not engaged. It looks like I don't care about this topic, which isn't true. I do care about this topic, and I'm excited to be presenting it to you. Our next point is body language. So you want to stand with confidence. That's shoulders up and back. I've got good posture right now. I'm not slouching. If you can avoid it, don't sit for a presentation. Try to get up. You also want to focus on moving naturally. So I'm breaking my own rule here because I'm on camera and I need to be in frame. But you want to make sure if you're speaking in front of a live audience that you're not getting stuck behind a desk or podium. I'll talk about this in a second. I do want to say you want to be mindful of not fidgeting. I am a born fidgeter. I'm very fidgety. And often we see people who are nervous kind of pacing or with their hands in their pockets, or they're curling their hair, or they're sitting with their arms folded, or this is distracting. Focus on identifying your nervous body language behaviors and getting out of the habit of them. This is something you can achieve with practice, I promise. I have a pro tip on body language, another tip from my dad, shout out Benny. And this is what I call the hula hoop trick. It helps you move yourself a little bit more naturally, or appear a little bit more naturally in a presentation. So physically moving your body is a great way to signal a transition to your audience. So you'll notice that I speak a lot with my hands. Another thing that I can do if I want to talk about something is move. I'm envisioning myself in a hula hoop, so in a small circle. And if I want to talk about something new or different, to talk about that point, I might move to one point of my hula hoop. For the remainder of this point, I'm going to stay to the left side. Okay? Now I'm ready to talk about something else. And as I'm ready to talk about something else, I'm walking. Now I'm at this point in my hula hoop and I'm talking. This seems a little silly. The reason that we do this is because a physical movement in the body visually signals to our audience members that the topic is changing. I'm changing. There is a change. It's simple and it's effective and it does work. Some things about voice and voice modulation is work on your pitch. Speak up. Make sure your voice can be heard by everyone in the room. When I'm presenting live, I often say, hey, can you hear me in the back? I try to do that not at a yell, but at my normal speaking volume. If you know that you're not a naturally loud person, that's okay, but you should consider a microphone. Can you get one? Work that out beforehand. You should consider room size. You don't have to be as loud in a small room as you have to be in a large room. And consider where your audience is seated. So if I'm in a small room but everyone is at the back, I do need to be louder. If everyone is in the front, I can speak at a softer tone, right? Feel free to tell people to move if you are at liberty to do so. If you're a quiet person and everyone's in the back, you can say, hey, I'm quiet and I don't have a microphone. And if you want to hear this presentation, it's in your best interest to move to the front. I really appreciate it. That's okay. The next thing you want to look at is tone. So something you want to avoid is speaking really monotonously. Monotonous meaning all in one tone with no vocal variation. And the reason you want to avoid this is because it's very boring. And if I were to talk like this for 20 minutes, you would simply not hear anything I said because it all sounded the same and it bored you. That's bad public speaking. You want to keep things most often professional and positive. Once again, this is my tip to try smiling. It is very hard to speak monotonously if you're smiling. It just doesn't work super well between your face and your voice. So work on keeping a bright, professional, positive, engaged facial expression to help your tone reflect that. Do make sure that you're matching the mood of your content. So you notice that I'm not smiling now and I'm speaking not monotonously. That's because I'm saying something serious. If I were to talk about something serious in a presentation, like an issue or even something sad, I would still want to be loud. I still want to vary my voice's tone, but I don't want to smile. Okay? The next thing we want to work on is pace. Pace is the thing that I struggle with most. But you want to work on not speaking too fast and not speaking too slow. Two things you can do here is learning to pause. The pause is so effective. It buys you some time. And it also helps your audience take in what you're saying. So you just watched me take a pause. I often take pauses after I introduce something or if I've asked a rhetorical question. Also, you want to try to avoid rambling, meaning you don't need to go on and on, like I am a little bit right now, about something you already stated. Keep it concise, to the point, keep it moving. Next, we're going to talk about time management. Make sure that you're thinking about how long your presentation needs to take and how long it is typically taking. Once again, practice, practice, practice. Understand how long you usually take to get through your material. If you're finding that you're often going under, first, a prevention tip is looking in to see where you can add more to have more time. You can add additional content, you can add context, you can add a background section, you can lengthen the explanation, you can look at providing examples. If you are presenting and you are looking at your watch and you're saying, I'm grossly under time, you can respond to this by adding additional content. So maybe you have something you can pop into the presentation, or by lengthening out an explanation, talking a bit more about, I want to return actually to this. An example we see here is, again, this isn't ideal. What you want to do is always prevent instead of respond, but it is something you can do. If you notice you're often going over, something you can do is, as you practice, use a watch to understand how long you take, and then set time goals. I want to be done with my introduction in 3 minutes. I want to be done with point 1 in 8 minutes. Wear the watch during your presentation. Check. If this strategy is going to distract you, don't use it. You might have a friend in the audience who can signal hey, you're at 10 minutes. That can be helpful, but if the technology is going to bother you, don't use technology. I personally love to use my watch to keep my presentation on time goals. If you're going over during a presentation, try to identify during your practice times which sections you could skip if you had to. This isn't ideal, but if you can effectively identify things that you can move past without affecting your flow, do so. The next thing I want to talk about is responding to questions. It can be really tough to think on your feet. It can be even tougher to think on your feet during a presentation that you really, really rehearsed. So if you show up and you're like, I know what I'm talking about, and someone asks a question and you're like, I didn't prepare to talk about that, it can make you feel really ungrounded. Some strategies for this is to, 1, repeat the question that was asked. This does several things. 1, it ensures that you're getting the question right, because the person can correct you. It also ensures that the entire audience hears the question. Once again, that's back to your pitch here. Say it loud enough for the people in the back. And it gives you time to process what was asked. So if you ask me a question about why I should repeat questions, I would say, wow, thank you. For those of you who might not have heard, we got a question in the front here about why it's important to repeat back someone's question. I think that I've just given myself 5 seconds. I can think about why I think this is important while I'm repeating that. You're also at liberty to take a pause. So I've got my example here. Great question. I'd actually like to take a moment before responding. Okay, so this does 2 things. 1, it gives you that second to think. And 2, it shows the person that asked the question that you are meaningfully and mindfully engaging with their question. You're not just pulling something up. You're thinking about what do I think about that? How should I respond to that? What can I pull from my presentation that answers this? And that's good public speaking. There's no shame in taking a pause. It's a really good strategy. My final tip is to reframe your I don't know, because sometimes you don't know the answer. You want to avoid looking someone in the eyes during your presentation, especially an academic presentation, and going, You should know your content enough to direct someone to information that is most likely to help their question. So I might say, great question. I don't think that I'm the expert on this. However, my colleague is doing research on, and I'm certain that they would have good insight. Or I might say, that's complicated. Some scholars think that, and still yet other scholars think that. So there's clearly some debate on the topic. These are non-answers, and they're strong. They're strong because it tells you that I know my content well enough to tell you where you can go for more information. It's also a strong public speaking skill. All right, let's talk about engaging with that audience and commanding and controlling attention, both super important. First, you want to make sure you start strong. I talked about this a little bit, but a strong presentation begins with a strong introduction. In your first 5 minutes, you should introduce yourself. Hi, my name's Kennedy Bailey. I'm from the Writing Center. Introduce your topic. Today, I'm here to talk to you about strong public speaking skills. You want to introduce why it matters. Public speaking is a great way to make sure that your content is being delivered and understood effectively. Boom. You do this to create connection. If you want your audience to listen to you, you must first make sure they see you and felt seen by you. So, who are you? Why are you here? Why do I care what you're saying? Tell them up front. Be strong, smile, and be personable. Try to present yourself as someone that these people can relate to. This topic is something these people care about. The next thing you want to think about is using examples and metaphors. The reason we bring this up is because very few people can remain engaged in content that doesn't provide them with something tangible. Concepts are hard, right? Something you can do to avoid this is use relevant examples. So if you're explaining something concrete, use an example to illustrate your point. If you're using a metaphor, this is because you're explaining a difficult concept or complex relationship. So if it's conceptual, explain it to something or compare it to something simpler or more familiar to your audience. This is going to help them make those connections and feel like they're understanding you a bit better. Another thing that we look into is interactivity. Oh, we got off here. There we go. We'll talk about what to do when your tech messes up in just a moment. But for now, we're talking about interactivity. Some presentations include interactions, which is a great way to keep audience members engaged. For this, you can consider asking your audience questions, utilizing those effective pauses. So I might say, why do you think it's important that we ask audiences questions? Well, what I've done here is I've not actually asked a question that I need answered, but I have asked a question. In doing so, I've made my audience think, and in making my audience think, I'm keeping them engaged. Then I can continue. This is a use of a pause. Or you can do guided release of information, being like, some people might say that this is important because. Looking into that. Slowly you're building more information. Provide them breadcrumbs. Lead them somewhere. This can be a great way to keep people informed. You can also, if your audience permits it, especially if things are a little bit more informal, create interactive response and assessment. So you can do forms, you can do quizzes, you can do activities, you can do a Kahoot, or you can do distributed material in more formal settings. So if you want to provide people with physical copies of your charts, graphs, results, etc. That's a great way to keep people engaged. Be sure to consider the parameters of your presentation. If I was presenting at a senior citizen's home, for example, I'm not going to use a QR code. Keep in mind what the people in your room are used to, and keep in mind what is appropriate. Also, make sure that you're maintaining enthusiasm. Assess your energy and check in with your audience's energy levels. Notice when they develop those blank stares or those glazed eyes or their bored yawns, and you're just like, how can you reach them again? Try to add enthusiasm into your voice. Try to add energy into your body. Make them want to look at you, right? Also, if you feel like you're losing people to their phones, try to bring them back through those interactivity points. So ask a question. Make them think, right? Also, understand your pace. So if there's a section of your presentation that lulls, if this is a presentation you do multiple times and you're like, I lose people here, shorten it. Alternatively, if you've noticed that there's a place where you're really engaging people, lengthen that. Play into it. That absolutely can be a great way to connect with your audience. All right, ever timely, right after I just had a technical challenge, we're going to talk about how to handle technical challenges and all types of challenges. Because addressing potential situations that happen in a presentation environment before they happen is the best way to make sure that when they happen, because they always do, you are better equipped to move through them. You might have technology challenges. A way you can do this first is through prevention. Familiarize yourself with the technology you're going to use beforehand and practice in the room where you will present. So for me, I'm lifting the curtain for you again. The room that I'm presenting in now is one that I present in often. I'm in NMBU's film studio. With this, I practice here. I still sometimes have a bit of trouble with the technology because it's different than the technology I use every day. But through practice, I've limited the amount of times that I make technological mistakes. However, they still happen. If you find that you're presenting and you need to respond to a technical difficulty, have a backup plan or several. So if this screen wasn't working for me, can I do this presentation tech-free? Yes, I can. How? I'm just going to talk at you and I'm going to shorten it a bit. Okay? Interruptions are another type of potential challenge that you could see during your presentation. If you need to refocus after a live interruption, it's okay to laugh, right? So somebody walks in and goes, and and then walks out, you can kind of take a second and be like, whoops. And it's also okay to take a break. So something, I don't have mine with me, but something I like to do when I present is to have a water bottle. And if something makes me feel off kilter, I might say, excuse me, I'm going to have a drink of water. And then the time that it takes for me to take a drink of water provides me with enough buffer to reassess my feelings, take that restorative breath, and get back on track, right? Also, you might run into the challenge of getting stumped, right? Typically, you should know your material well enough to have an answer, or at the very least, an answer as to why you don't know something to a question. If you need to exit gracefully from something, meaning someone's asked a question and you don't know the answer, try to redirect it to what you do know. Like I said, be able to provide those, you should try checking here types of things. You want to make sure that you are connecting with people and that you are getting out of those tough spots with grace. People are going to generally like you more and think you're a stronger presenter. Not if you're perfect, but if you can move through a challenge. The last thing I want to talk to you about today is post-presentation reflection. These are the things you can do to make sure that as you're practicing, as you're doing academic presentations, you are improving, and that every presentation you do is a little bit better than the last one. The means through which you can do this are first, self-assessment. A lot of you are going to hate this tip. I hate this tip, and I do use it. It's practice with a mirror or with a camera. Set something up and record yourself speaking and watch it. This is where you're going to pick up on those fidget behaviors. When I'm nervous, I bounce. Notice that by watching a video recording of yourself and be mindful of it. You could also practice with a stopwatch and practice in the environment of delivery. So give this presentation in the room where you're going to give it when it's live. You can also work on improving with mentors and peers. Ask them for feedback. Something that can be helpful is asking for specific feedback. So I'm looking for feedback on my delivery techniques, specifically my pitch and volume and my use of metaphors. This gives the person I'm working with a really specific area to focus on, and it helps me to improve a specific part of my public speaking skills. Something else you want to make sure you're doing as you're speaking is you want to make sure you're setting goals. What did you like that you've done? What did you think could be improved? How do you think you could improve it? When would you like to improve it by? Be serious about these. Set tangible goals that you can reach and that you can check up on, and celebrate yourself when you do reach them. All right, we have reached the end of this presentation. I would like to quickly review with you what we went over. This is also a good presentation skill strategy. Review what you did. First, we talked about preparation, understanding your audience, your main idea, and your overall flow. We talked about visuals, what makes a strong visual, what makes a poor visual. We talked about delivery, so that confident public speaking, making eye contact, being in your body, being loud if you need to be, controlling the pitch and the tone of your voice. We talked about engagement. How are you bringing the people in your room into your presentation? We talked about challenges, technical mistakes, having a stumble, someone walking in. Take a breath, refocus, continue. And we talked about reflection. What were you proud of? Where could you improve? How are you watching yourself improve? That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have questions, you can check us out on Facebook and on Instagram, NMBU Writing Centre and NMBU Centre. Or you can reach out at the Writing Centre email address. That's Writing Centre, S-E-N-T-R-E, it's the British spelling, at nmbu.no. For now, I'm Kennedy Bailey. Happy writing and happy speaking.